Jim Clark, the 1963 and 1965 Drivers' World Champion. A man, during his time, had all the records. Most points, most wins, most pole positions, most fastest laps, and also one of the greatest. In my most recent episode, as of May 2024, once I'm filming this, my most recent video was Jim Clark's final interview. And during that project, I became very curious about who Jim Clark was a person, not a racing driver. Now, in this special episode of The Forgotten Formula, I'll be heading outside, away from the computer, and going to where Jim Clark called home, Scotland. And during there, I'll see the Heritage Centre in his name, his cars, and also his house. This is Forgotten Formula Special.
Until the aircraft has come to a complete stop in the captain and switched off the fasten seatbelt sign for you. Please exercise extreme caution when you're up in the overhead lockers as items of your carry-on luggage may have been dislodged during landing.
I'm there, so got about, well, it's about 12:30. I have until 25 to 12 to get to, so I have about an hour to get to the train station to go to Berwick, so Scotland for here. Wait for me. Welcome to Waverley. I have about, about 10 minutes to my train now. So, Christ, the run now. Is that it? That's 11. Christ, kill me. 1 second. Okay, I've made it now to the platform, but I think the train's up there, but I know what to do. So, good. Welcome to Berwick upon Tweed, the town that switched borders 10 times, and something I don't know what to do. I heard there's a high street. I heard there's a fucking Roman wall. So I'm here for 2 hours. So I decided to try and find something to do. Now I'm in England, enemy territory. So after having a look around Berwick, I discovered the visitor centre. So had a look around there. The woman who ran the place was actually very nice. She was selling teas and coffees, but it opened during COVID, so it's only now it's prospering. But yeah, it's good. So after waiting about 2 hours for a bus, I got on the bus back to Scotland. And so starts the many problems I have with public transport on the borders.
I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion, but I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of...
In the village town of Whitsom. Well, I only realised now I'm back in Scotland. I was in England, now I'm back in Scotland, but I was in a lovely visitor centre in Berwick. Very nice people, very nice woman who runs it. I was just talking to some tourists, but I was like the youngest person there for centuries. Now, a bit away now, aren't I? Said 5 minutes. Chose this. That's more than 5 minutes, and I have to go through a bloody housing estate to get essentially a nice granny flat. So yeah, I'm tempted to hitchhike, but I know that will end wrong. But yeah, I'm now in here. Let's talk about Jim Clark. The only thing I know, he's born in the 30s in Fife, and he moved down to the area of Churnside with his family. He was one of 5, he was the only boy. In 1942 they moved, so that's the plan. I'm going to go there now, there today, talk to the museum. Andrew and Kenneth, hopefully, I think it's Ken I'm talking to, but Andrew is the one who helped me. Thank you, Andrew. I bought them nice little fudges, nice Irish fudges. So that's the plan. Go there, and I saw this. They posted today. Museum, there's an Indy car. Happy out. But you know what? Walking through here, it does feel familiar, like Ireland, with the nice little windy roads, but like everything's been more developed. But like, I love the atmosphere, and there's nice yellow flowers out and all that nice stuff. Now I know why your man lived here. Now I know why he loved the simple life. Well, at the same time, he drove fast cars. Well, I'll talk to you.
Da drüben, Dankeschön, jetzt ist Rotlicht da. Jim, this is our camera. We are very happy to have you here in our studio, and I'm just explaining a little bit to our audience who you are. You are 32 years of age.
True.
Kann man sagen, bei einem Herrn, one can say this for a gentleman, I mean, you are not a lady.
Very young.
Ja. 32 Jahre alt, stammt aus Schottland, von einer Schaffarm, die er von seinen Eltern übernommen hat, hat ein Büro in London und seinen zweiten Wohnsitz auf den Bahamas. Wer möchte das nicht, meine Damen und Herren? Und um alle Verpflichtungen rechtzeitig erfüllen zu können, reist Jim Clark mit seinem eigenen zweimotorigen Flugzeug. You are traveling with your own airplane, with a 2-engine plane, is it right?
That's right.
Okay, at the museum now. Ready to go in? Go around. Hello, how are you?
Enda.
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Kenny.
Kenneth, perfect.
How you doing?
Yeah, it's okay if I record actually.
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
I'll put that up there. Okay, so, can you tell me about Jim Clark's early life now? About maybe up until before racing, you know?
Sure thing, yeah. So Jim was actually born in Fife. People think of him as a borderer, but it was actually north of the Forth, where he was born and raised until he was 5 years old. The family took a new farm down here in Berwickshire. Several family members had done that, so they'd acquired different farms between here and a town called Kelso, and Jim's father decided to come and join them and move them down here.
I saw this morning about that. The IndyCar.
Yeah. So it's new with us for this year. We usually get a different car in each year. So we've had a different Lotus Cortina, we've had a Formula 1 car, we've had one of Jim's private road cars that he drove in Paris.
Oh yes.
And for this year, Nick Fennell, having done the restoration a few years ago, he was very kindly lent us this for at least 1 year. Who knows, it might be with us for longer. But
How many acres then? It was like 1,200, wasn't it?
I wouldn't know how many acres it was, I'm afraid. Yeah, you'd have to ask the family that probably. But it was a reasonable sized farm, mixed material, but they mainly were doing sheep and cattle at that time.
Yes. Yeah. Today, actually, it's still they make lamb out of the.
Yeah. So it's primarily sheep farming now. That'll be right. But
I wouldn't eat lamb myself, but you know.
Yeah, as you go around the museum, you'll see pictures of Jim with his sheepdog called Sweep. There was actually more than one Sweep, believe it or not.
I see Sweep.
Each time Sweep was retired or passed away, the next dog apparently got called Sweep as well. So there's multiple Sweeps. We never know which is which in the pictures.
Oh god, because they all look the same, don't they?
But so he went to school at Chirnside, which was the nearest little village to where he was staying. And he later went to a couple of private schools outside Edinburgh, lastly Loreto at Musselburgh. And then when he was 16, came back home to work on the farm.
Was this after his grandparents died?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So because the family were running different farms, when somebody got too old or passed away, they would kind of redistribute among the other family members who was looking after.
So this is one of his suits, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is from the year before. So we're talking about this. This was Al Unser's car in '66 at Indy, and then '67 with Jim. So we wind back a little bit further to '65. And this is his race suit from when he wins the Indianapolis 500 miles.
Oh, that's the actual suit?
It is, yep.
Oh,
it's not a replica. That's
Christ,
the real
that's
one.
it.
In fact, it's still, you can still see a couple of little oil and kind of dirt marks. We assume it was never washed. Maybe it was, but
no sweat marks.
We'll work on the assumption that it wasn't. So they're probably original from
probably stinks at this point.
60 years ago, just almost now. So yeah.
Would this be environmentally sealed off there?
The case is, it's not air conditioned or anything.
So we don't get the smell of it, thankfully.
So Jim came home when he was 16, work on the farm, obviously being responsible for running one of the family farms. And I suppose at that point, he might have just gone on to be a successful farmer in the area, like some other people have. But he decided to go to the Young Farmers Club at Ednam, which is just outside Kelso. It's not that far from here, about half an hour's drive.
Oh, yeah.
And he met a man there called Ian Scott Watson, who only actually died last autumn, so Ian lived to a ripe old age into his 90s. Okay. But Ian was into amateur motorsport.
Oh, yes.
He had a bit of money behind him. He had some second-hand sports cars over the years, and he became pals with Jim, and then said to Jim, why don't you come along and try racing as well? And so through that kind of unintentional process in a way, I don't think Jim Clark ever really thought about motor racing as something he would do himself, and certainly never as a career. But through the late 50s, still working on the farm, just racing in his spare time, he began to become more and more prominent in the amateur racing scene. So he was racing with the Border Reivers team that was refounded, and what probably made his name more than anything else was 1958 in the Jaguar D-Type that we had a little look at earlier on. He became the first man in Britain ever to average 100 miles an hour in a sports car race. So a bit like we think of Roger Bannister in the 4-minute mile, same kind of thing, the first ever to break that barrier in motor racing in Britain.
In that?
And it's in the D-Type that's at the back there, that very car.
150 miles an hour?
100 miles an hour average, yeah. So until that, he had the circumstances behind him a little bit. It was a race on an American air base at Full Sutton in Yorkshire. The runways had just been relayed, so the tarmac was beautiful and smooth, and it was long straight, so it was the environment you'd have wanted. But he was the first man to ever do it. So. A little fact about John Surtees is it's kind of John Surtees that gave Jim Clark his chance, and indirectly, John Surtees was all Lotus in the early 60s.
Yes.
The season that Jim Clark came in and started to race for them, he wasn't actually on the roster of the top 3 drivers for that season. But John Surtees, I believe, was still doing his motorcycling a lot then as well.
Yes, he was a MotoGP.
And so some of the races, he wasn't around, he was off doing motorcycling. So I believe that those were some of the races that Jim got to drive the third car.
Oh, yeah.
And he was obviously good enough that at the end of the season they gave him a permanent
It
seat.
It was Holland 1961, wasn't it? Or
That's right,
yes.
Yeah. So
and he retired from that race, didn't
he had a kind of interesting route in that he wasn't really supposed to race in Formula 1 at all. So,
He was more supposed to race something like this in Le Mans, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Was
So 1960 he joined up with Lotus, but he actually still raced this type of car. It wasn't this particular one, it was an Aston Martin DBR1 by then for the Border Reivers at Le Mans.
Very similar with the headpiece at the back there.
Look, exactly,
yeah.
So it would be blue, that one.
Yeah,
but,
that's nice.
He raced that last race for the Border Reivers at Le Mans in 60, when he was just early on in his career with Lotus.
What was like the reaction to maybe, let's say, when he was racing Formula 1, where people gathered around the radio, even listening to stuff like in the Indy 500 or stuff like that? Would they anticipate would be a lot of nerves and stuff like that?
In the local area, he was the big hero of the 1950s and certainly 1960s. I'm a local man from Duns. I'm obviously a lot later than that, but you speak to people who talk about how big a name he was. And to give you an example, there was a gentleman who came and did some volunteering at the museum some years ago, talked about the fact that Jim was racing, I think, somewhere in in Germany or France, but anyway, on the continent of Europe. And this local guy, was at a race at Charter Hall, which was the kind of local racetrack where Jim started out. And Jim won a race somewhere, like I say, it was Germany, France, Spain, something like that. And it came on the tannoy at the Charter Hall event that Jim had won. And he said it was the biggest cheer of the day. So bigger than anyone who actually won that Charter Hall. The biggest cheer of the day was when it was 9. So he was a local hero.
There's a lot of footage when he returned, like from race wins or winning the World Championship, on a tractor and on a bus. I know.
That's
right.
right.
I see there's film footage of both of them.
There's open top bus tours in Chirnside. I think both times he was world champion. And he also did a parade through Duns here on a traction engine. The traction engine was called Border Reaver, oddly enough, actually, which links him with the name of his old team.
Yes.
But,
what happened to Border? Is Border Reader still around? Because
the Border Reavers team, in the form that Jim knew it, not now. It went defunct. I think it's been defunct several times over the years. There may be a reformed team of some kind. I couldn't just say earlier in his career with Lotus. So.
Yeah, I can't believe he did so much, but he should have won Le Mans. It's so unfortunate that he didn't.
It's the one thing I suppose you could say. I mean, he has a third overall and a second in class with the Border Reavers.
Oh yes.
And in fact, we'll show you the trophy in a second.
The trophy room. Oh.
Yeah, we can get there. Yeah. So with this car was again the first proper sports car he was using really with the Border Reavers. He had a Porsche before that, but if we're talking about an open top,
yes,
really powerful machine.
And these were very. There's a seatbelt in there. That's very rare for the time, isn't it?
He wouldn't have had a seatbelt. Yeah.
Oh, that's new.
That's been retrofitted for the classic car events at Goodwood. Yeah.
Oh, so no crack then.
He would not have had. The Indy car he would have. The Americans had cottoned on by then, but earlier
they were soft, weren't they?
No seat restraints. Last year we had a Lotus 25 Formula 1 car.
Yes, I saw the photos there on the website.
180 mile an hour top speed, whatever. The roll bar comes up about half of your head. And
yeah.
It has no restraints. So
I do say
different type of safety was the attitude then.
Just don't die. That was a pray. Yeah. I think we had more religious drivers back then, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is, like I say, that the Americans, even by '66, they've said, you must have either. I think you could have a lap restraint, but certainly by his time, most of them were using shoulder harnesses.
Yeah.
But no, and I don't know if Jim Clark ever raced a Formula 1 race in which he had restraints.
And I was doing a most recent video. I could send you the link to it in the future. It's on Jim Clark's final interview. Was filmed 24 hours in Hockenheim.
In the German TV. That's right.
German TV. I translated it actually because it's not translated. Like I should have paid my friend because he's German to translate it. But like he gave it to me on a piece of paper, so I had to type it in, and there was no spell check on the editor. And I remember there's an expression in German. He said, break a leg and a neck.
Right.
And 24 hours later, he broke a neck.
I get that. It's a kind of sad poignancy of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the one where they wheel the car into the studio at some point, don't
yes.
He helps push it.
Kurt Ahrens was the person in the car.
Right,
I remember, I'm in this video, I might just show the clip of it, but he's covering the Martini sponsorship. Because you couldn't show alcohol. Sponsorship in Germany, but you could show cigarette brands.
Fair enough.
Because you could just see the gold leaf on it then.
Well, interesting, talking about the sponsor side of things,
STP.
This would be about the first time, certainly with Lotus, that Jim would have been racing in a car with sponsor branding, because when he won at Indianapolis the year before, it was still just green with a yellow stripe.
And with some other race team sponsors, for the event, but
not. On the odd occasion he was, for example, in America he did occasionally he did one NASCAR race, for example.
Yeah, I can't find
what car that was in. But,
there's nothing on Wikipedia about it. That's the thing. It only has Champ Car.
I think it was it was a little bit of one-off. I don't think he even did that well necessarily. But then in Formula 1 it wasn't until '68 that the gold leaf sponsorship came in. So this in '66, I speculate maybe the very first times that he actually raced a Lotus car with proper, in fact, as you can see, it's not even green now.
Yes.
And it's got the STP.
And what's with? I saw this in the original photo of it. What's with the Tiger?
So, interesting fact for you. In Indiana, they weren't the fuel company that we call Esso.
Yeah,
weren't able to call themselves Esso. Someone was already called Esso, I believe. So Enco. You see, it's actually it's the same font and logo.
Yes, I see there.
So it's put a Tiger in your tank for Esso, but it's actually Enco. So there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Little novelty fact. I don't know if Enco is still their brand name in America. I'll have to look that up.
I think it's called Alliance now.
In
I saw
parts
it.
of America, certainly they had to call themselves Enco. So, yeah.
Yes. But where's the tractor today? Because I know
The traction engine, I don't know. I can tell you when I was at the school,
I was told by the farmer he dumped it.
right, I've got no idea. The traction engine used to, so they were going back 15, 20 years now, but the traction engine used to live in a shed at a house right beside the high school. But I believe the man that had it died, and so someone else would have had it after that.
Yeah,
So,
he said one of the tractors that are there, he dumped it.
Right.
But because he barely, even the woman who lived, the wife, like, barely knows about anything, like.
Okay,
But
I
you
don't
know
know.
what? That's tradition. You have some things will be forgotten, and I'm
Yeah,
not one of these
yeah,
people
yeah.
who sobs over like a broken wall. You know what I mean? I do history, so.
Interestingly, talking about traction engine there, but one of his diesel tractors from working on the farm still survives, and someone restored it and actually goes to local vintage car events. So yeah, one of his Ford tractors. And the other side is his Rookie of the Year jacket from '63.
I heard about the jacket.
Because he finished second.
I didn't know it was real.
in his first ever run at the race, which is pretty incredible if you think about it.
Yeah, he nearly. So, oh yeah,
So
Rookie of the Year.
you can see the Rookie of the Year, yeah. So, and he should really have won. Parnelli Jones won, but he was looking oil and he never got black flagged. So some people argue that Jim was really the in fact, if we talked earlier on about Formula 1 near misses, he won 2 championships. He probably would have won a third in '68, but he could have won 2 more before that he narrowly missed out on.
He could have won one before.
He could have won Indy 3 times.
He could have won the World Championship in South Africa against Graham
Yeah.
Hill before.
Exactly.
Engine went.
So if things had turned out slightly differently, he'd have been 4 or 5-time world champion and maybe 3-time IndyCar winner. So he came second this year, and if you wind on to after, some people thought he'd won. There was a lap count dispute at Indy in '66. The race finished, the scoreboard said he'd won. Some of the media thought he'd won, some of the crowd thought he'd won, Lotus thought he'd won, but it turned out that Graham Hill had won. There was a big dispute about whether
Oh
he
yes, there's
missed
that
the lap or not. So
so no one really.
in fact, we could blame this car because this is Al Unser's car from '66, and it was this physical car that caused. He skidded off the track. They had to pause the race. And the result of that was that they think that some of the cars did a lap before they came into the pit. Some of them went straight in. That's probably where the lap count error was made. And so this was Jim's car the following year. And so this actual car right in front of us could be the reason that he didn't win Indy for a second time.
So who do we blame? Who do we point fingers
Well,
at?
it's interesting that Jim only ever really kind of blamed fate. He just said it was bad luck really. He never they never appealed, they never disputed it. He was quite philosophical about things.
Was he ever religious actually? Because a lot of these drivers would be religious at the
He
time.
was, yeah. His father was an elder in the church at Chirnside, the churchyard where he's buried.
Jim is Jim Jr., isn't he?
Yeah. So Jim's father was Jim or James as well. That's right.
Yeah.
And we know that. When he was back home on a Sunday, he used to go along to the church there. So I mean, we don't know obviously, and he never talked about it publicly really. But we have that assumption that he would have been. And the interesting thing about it is, I suppose, that
Racing vicar.
his father obviously was someone who was never that keen for him to go into motorsport.
Yes, they didn't. The parents did not like him.
Partly the danger we think, but also partly odd enough because when he was an amateur, of course, it was costing money, and his father thought, it's just a waste of money. His father also had a kind of quite strict attitude towards what you should spend
And
your cash on. So.
Even when he was racing before, like with just no sponsors, that was still very little at the time, and the tax was very high for sports people, like because this was more a sense of entertainment than athleticism.
I mean, Jim was world champion, Formula 1 world champion, made him a rich man, but didn't make him a millionaire by our standards. It was winning Indianapolis. The American prize money was out of this world.
Yes, even the minor races, like
Partly because you won so many $100 or $1,000 for every lap.
yeah.
And so as a result of that, you would, if in his case, he led almost every lap of that race and popped it up. And it was all the subsidiary sponsors as well. So we know that Jim won a year's supply of meat from some Indiana butchery company.
I wouldn't trust American meat
He
anyway.
won, I think it was something like
$2,000 worth of clothes?
Yeah, clothes.
Clothes.
He won the pace car, which we believe was dropped in Southampton Dock and written off.
There's a person in Cork who actually owns a 1973 pace car. Actually,
Right,
drives it around the city like.
There you go.
Yeah.
It was a Ford Galaxies.
I'm off to see the latest attempts at wasn't to get relegated.
Yeah, we'll have a good trip.
I'm going in your car tomorrow.
Sorry, So there are some of his machines from early days survives. It's not just the Jaguar as well. A couple of his early cars, the Porsche that he drove before that, still survived as well. So.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So it's very weird. It's kind of nice. Like, let's talk about maybe his death, and then we can move on to the establishment of this heritage. Because is this essentially a heritage centre as well as a museum?
Yeah, I mean, it's the place to come for the preservation and memory of Jim Clark. Yeah. So we've got archive collections, and we've obviously got all his key trophies, and we have some of his race cars on show. But it's more than just obviously the accumulation of the objects. It's in the town beside where he grew up, where he farmed. It's a kind of focal point, I suppose. So in that respect, we're both museum and heritage centre and archive, and yeah, we kind of act as the focus, I suppose. You know, a lot of people come here on almost a little pilgrimage, so they'll tend to come here to the museum. They might go and look at his grave at Chirnside Churchyard.
Yeah, I'm going to do that tomorrow.
Some people
actually,
go to the farm. There's a kind of trail. People go to Charter Hall in Winfield, the little local tracks that he raced on. Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of collection of locations that people like to visit if they're really into Jim's legacy. They get a bit bigger, and then from about here on, these are Grand Prix and so on. And
what was it? He won the Dutch Grand Prix. That was his first win.
Yeah, that's right. So
is that trophy here?
61. I shall check.
Oh, we're looking for this.
There you go. And sorry, that's third place at the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort 61.
He debuted in 1960,
so,
yes?
Yep, so it's...
year later on podium, that's really good.
One of the problems is, of course, that he's in far more Formula 1 races than in the World Championship, so it gets a bit confusing.
Yeah.
For example, we have the Mexican Grand Prix trophy from the first Mexican Grand Prix he won, but it wasn't in the championship till the following year.
Yes, non-championship races were.
So yeah, but no, we've got a good selection of things. For example, these are all South African ones that weren't in the championship. But they'll be down here somewhere. So that's 62, the Belgian, for example. So that's giving me a bearing where we are there.
Yes. Yeah. They're very interesting how they change. You know, now when you see a Grand Prix trophy, it's all the similar. Now
they are.
It's
and
very...
of course, what I like is, for example, something that's a bit out of the box. So this is the Austrian, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, so that's, it's a little Edelweiss flower on a rock.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what was the Dash reaction in the local area when he was killed?
It's quite fascinating, really. I mean, obviously the people that remember it now, to be old enough, are probably in their 70s and 80s now. And they speak about it, and people, times past talked about it as well, almost like a local version of when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. So there's that old phrase that everybody knows where they were when they heard that John F. Kennedy had been shot. And local people say it's the same thing. When someone flagged them down as they were driving through town and said, "Have you heard Jim Clark died in Germany today?" Or someone heard it on the radio, or the newspaper came through the door the following morning, they picked it up and they saw the news. So because he was that, the biggest name, the world figure to come from Berwickshire in the mid 20th century,
it's like if
it was a great shock to everybody.
It's like if Max Verstappen gets killed.
He was the first man who'd been world champion ever to die racing. Some people had died in practice or the open road.
Yes, like Mike Hawthorne, he just died.
He was the first to die in an actual race. He was the youngest world champion when he became it a few years beforehand. He just start of that year broken Fangio's record for the most Grand Prix wins.
Yes, he had one extra race in South Africa.
So he was really he was the cut above. He was like Schumacher was 20 years ago. He was like Hamilton was 5 years ago. He was the top of the game. Yes. And also he was known as being such a gentle driver, someone who never really crashed, never had much trouble with collisions and so on. So for him to die in a crash obviously was doubly horrifying for everybody.
Yeah, I'd say it was the wheel exploded, because no one, it could have been the suspension or the wheel.
We'll never know. Yeah, it was a tyre, or it was suspension, or it was there's a little theory perhaps the fuel pump cutting it out, but we won't know. The fact is, there's an image of the scene, around the side there.
there's film of the scene. Like I did that in the video. I put down a viewer discretion, because I only showed maybe 10 seconds of it, but dear God, it's disturbing, because you could see the wheel. Did he smash his head on the wheel, or was he ejected out of the car?
I don't really know. I think he did come out of the car, but I mean, it was the speed involved. It was instantaneous, of course.
But he would have been killed if he was in the car.
The car was split into pieces. Yeah,
he would have been killed if there was a seatbelt. It was impossible to survive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But what was the funeral like around here then?
Well, his funeral was at Chirnside. As I say, that's the village just to the east of us here, and thousands of people turned out for that. There's a very poignant thing, if you ever watch the kind of Pathé clips of it. The kind of older man, front right, carrying his funeral up into the churchyard, was actually George Campbell, who was the farm steward from home. So Jim had known George since he was a boy, grown up with him, and then when Jim was away a lot racing, he'd looked after the farm and kept things in the straight and narrow. So there's a kind of double poignancy of this fella carrying the coffin. And there's a lovely one with a squirrel drinking out the rim of the cup.
Oh, that's clever.
That's for finishing. That's for fastest lap at Monaco. He never won Monaco.
Yes,
Probably the only one of the real of his era major races that he never won.
I was a bit scared for a second because I thought that was an orange order thing for a second.
It's Swiss Cowbell.
Thank God.
From a mountain hill climb, and bizarrely enough, he took a IndyCar to that mountain hill climb. I can think of no less suitable vehicle, certainly of racing standards, but it was a publicity thing, really. So they went to 2 hill climb races in Switzerland.
And he won it?
No, he didn't actually. The car was useless, but it was completely unsuited for all the twists and turns.
It couldn't turn right,
but
then.
He was the big name, so they gave him a big giant Swiss Cowbell.
Yeah.
And it does work. When we built this place 5 years ago, when I was walking down the stairs with it, it was clanging away. So.
Don't drop it.
It'll be some size of cow, but yeah, that's the Swiss Cowbell.
Yes.
You can see JC.
GC.
1965. So they've
lovely.
personalised it for him. So.
And nice little custom trophies, wheels, Goodwood ton.
Yeah, so I can't imagine they do it nowadays because you'd be giving them out all the time. But averaging over 100 mile an hour at Goodwood, you got a little ton weight symbol.
That's pretty easy nowadays, isn't it?
And you were talking about this actually. He was never British Sports Personality of the Year. I believe he came.
And Jackie Stewart
in the
was
top 3, maybe 3 times or something. But he was the American equivalent. This is ABC Television world athlete of the year.
He won it,
and so he was near enough to. We can say he was American Sports Personality of the Year.
Yeah.
So
did George live in the house, or did he live in a separate house nearby?
I think he lived separately. Yeah. There was a housekeeper who lived in the house, but I believe so. But no, I think the Campbells lived somewhere else.
We don't know. Do we know what Clark and the housekeeper got up to then?
No, I think, and interestingly enough, we had a photograph of her came into the museum a little while ago, but she's not someone I know much about really. But Jim's kind of life story was, always grounded in the local area. So he never really took to the world of celebrity insofar as all the trappings. He was happy to be at home among farming people, just going to the sheep sales. Out talking to the workmen on the farm.
Would he be just walking down there one day, even?
Well, even this actual building, believe it or not, this used to be the borough, when done to the town council, this was the borough chambers, and so Jim would have come in here to, do the odd bit of paperwork. There is footage of him, I think he was filmed for a documentary, driving around Duns in his Ford Galaxy, and he goes into the post office, and I think he maybe comes up here to do, renew his driver's license or his road tax disc or something like that. And in fact, you're talking about the legacy and his funeral and so on. This was the place where the year after he died, they set up what was at that time the Jim Clark room, literally just one room, this space beside me.
So this was how it's
the first rectangular area here. I'm standing under what was the side wall of the building. So 5 years ago when this was all rebuilt, they put in girders and knocked out the wall here. But this first rectangular space, just the size of one large room, was the trophy room.
So when was the official building established then, or reopened?
So for 50 years there was the Jim Clark room. It was again a refurb in the early 1990s for the 25th anniversary of his death, and it was literally just one room with trophies in it and some photographs. Latterly a second room across the corridor was brought into use with videos running on a loop. But then in 2018 the building was closed and a big refurb done with lottery money, Scottish Borders Council money and other fundraising efforts. And so what you see today is the full-blown Jim Clark Motorsport Museum. And it's obviously a number of rooms with permanent exhibitions, his key trophies that can have their own areas of display, but it talks about his early life, his personality, his legacy. There's a cinema area, there's still a trophy room, although it's all interactive now with iPads that move and tell you about all the trophies. We've got a temporary exhibition gallery at the back, changes every year.
So this is
and then of course we've got cars, and that's the big thing, is that for 50 years there was never any of his cars on display.
Yeah, in the main racetrack in Ireland, it's called Mondello Park.
I've heard of that, yeah.
It's a great tree. It's all right. I've known people who raced on it. It's higgledy-piggledy, let's just say. But there's like a Honda Lola, in 1965, Honda Lola from IndyCar in there. Two Pacific F1 cars, 1994 and 1995. The one with was it Delatraz was the shitty driver for Pacific?
I wouldn't know who they who Pacific Racing had in the 90s, I'm afraid. So,
So but you see a lot of open wheelers. We never see this sort of Le Mans style and touring car, because Ireland, we don't even have a rally car in there, and Ireland is more famous for rally than we are for Derek Daly,
It's interesting. I don't know if it still is. I think it probably is.
Did you ever consider moving to America after, with all his success? Did you ever think, after Formula One, let's do a bit of IndyCar for a while?
Interesting enough, I don't know the answer to that. I suppose it's a big what if, isn't it? We think he would have retired from Formula One after 68 if he'd won for a third time.
I don't want to go into theories now, but like, if he carried on, if he wasn't killed in 1967, I'd say he would have been killed in Monza the same way Rindt was.
You don't know, I mean...
Or in the US, 1969, Graham Hill ejected.
The big question is whether he would have stopped racing entirely after 68,
yes.
or whether he'd have carried on in some form.
Yes.
My personal impression is that he was a kind of quite philosophical sort of guy. People think he'd have retired to the quiet life. I really do wonder if he'd just have stopped racing at the end of 68. So, and in which case, who knows? But yeah, he might have gone to America. I mean, it was clear that the money wasn't really something that bothered him too much. He did move abroad because he was getting taxed very heavily, as celebrities were.
But he did move back eventually, didn't he?
So he took a holiday house in Bermuda and he took a flat in Paris. And so for the last couple of years he wasn't in Britain very much.
Did his girlfriend break up with him because he didn't want to stop racing?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think the answer to that is sort of, but in a roundabout fashion. So Sally Stokes does say that Jim wouldn't get married until he retired because he didn't want to leave someone a widow and kids without a father and so on. And I believe she has said that the reason they broke up was because she wanted to get married and he obviously was still racing. Mm-hmm. So I suppose indirectly, the fact that he was still racing was why they didn't get married. So
yes. She's still alive now, isn't she?
She is. She was actually here when this place opened in 2019, yes. So she lives in New York these days. She married another racing driver, Eddie Schwartz. So I mean, she'll be in her...
She can never get out of the driver's seat, can she?
In her 80s now, I suppose, Sally. But she... in fact, in the lockdowns, we once did a Zoom-style guided tour for a car club in Los Angeles.
Oh, nice.
And at the end of it, Sally came on from New York on the call and did a Q&A. So we were here in Duns, the car club was in LA, and she was in the Big Apple. So it was quite a fun, among quite grim times, it was quite a fun little interlude. So.
There's just one more trophy I just want to look at. It's here. Is that the gold helmet, yes?
No, the gold, interestingly enough.
That looks like a gold helmet.
It looks like it, and in fact it's what the gold helmet that we'll see in a moment would have looked like before it was jazzed up, for want of a better word. So we'll see the gold helmet in just a second. This is... evidently it's the same structure, so we don't know who the company was, but there's a company obviously that made trophies. This is a kind of vanilla version, just in regular metal. It was actually obviously bought in about 1970 because it's one of the trophies from the early days of the Jim Clark Rally.
Yes, I heard about that.
When he died, there was various things done to commemorate his memory. There's a trust set up about road safety and race safety. There was this room as it was then, big museum as it is now, opened in 1969, and in 1970 a memorial rally began that still exists today. It's happening in a couple of weeks' time at the end of May, and these are some of the first trophies that were donated for that rally. So that's the standard version. I can't remember who donated. I think it's the Scotsman newspaper donated that. But then if we go through here,
from the bottom of my heart, I thank Kenneth and the whole staff at the museum. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go there, look inside the car at one point. So, have a look at some of the nice trophies I took photos of, and also sweep.
Very pleasing, yes.
Now, what about the old man, people like Hill and Clark?
Well, Hill's pretty old, but Clark's coming along. He's only... he's only 29.
You've travelled most of the way this season behind Jim Clark, Graham. What would you say is his most outstanding characteristic as a racing driver?
Well, I think getting across the line first. It's a bit irritating, actually.
Do you always know when he's behind you, Jim?
Yes, I can always recognise that moustache anywhere.
Well, gentlemen, look, seriously now, next year, change of formula, bigger engines. What does this mean to the firm of Hill and Clark?
Well, speaking as an old man, I'm rather looking forward to it. Jimmy, unfortunately, has got to use one of our engines, so just to show there's no ill feeling, I'm personally going to assemble his.
Now walking to the shop now. It's the day after interview, like, and you know what? I did an alright job. It was a bit messy to record because some points I just pointed down when I was looking away, like, you know, when your hand points down. So yeah, that's alright actually. So I think the rest is okay. Now, the plan after this was to get a taxi or a bus up to Clark's house. Now, since his passing, the Runciman family have owned the house, and I'll get onto that later. But I was a bit hungry, so I bought some bagels the day before, so I was just cutting one with a bread knife. And in layman's terms, I may have cut through two of my fingers. Now they were intact, everything was grand, nothing flew off. It's just I was screaming a bit, and it looked like a scene from Psycho in there. Luckily, the person who owned the Airbnb, had a first aid kit. Well, there was already a first aid kit in there. I was just too stupid to find it, even though it said it in a book. And I read it the day before, but anyway, I'll stop nagging on about myself. She helped out, and she just asked, "So, where are you in Scotland?" And I just said, "Oh, Jim Clark." And after one phone call and a lovely drop-off, I was talking to this guy, Doug Niven. And Doug is Clark's cousin. He's 10 years younger than Jim, and for like the next 20 minutes was like the most informative 20 minutes I ever got about Jim Clark. So I'm going to play it in its entirety, and some extra bits about Doug. He is also a farmer. He actually owned Clark's farm for a period of time until he sold it to the Runciman family, and was also a racing driver as well. Here's a nice photo or a video of it, of his V6 Chevy-powered Beetle for the Border Reivers. And a little story I found online was he once crashed into a porta potty. And that's that. Luckily, it was unoccupied. How are you doing, by the way? It's a lovely morning, isn't it?
Morning, yeah.
Yes.
So where are you from?
I'm from Ireland.
Ireland, okay.
Yeah, just near Blarney, actually. You know, Blarney Castle, yes?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yes, it's...
We used to go to Mandela Park in Kirkison.
Oh, yeah, I was there a couple, last year, the museum's very good there. It's a bit...
We used to race there, yeah.
Oh, did you do a bit of racing yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, what would you drive then?
We had 4 Escorts with 4 Capris, and we had a Volkswagen Beetle with which is a Formula 5000 car with a 5.7 litre V8 Chevy engine in it.
So it runs in the family now, doesn't it? Need for Speed now.
Well, after Jim Clark was killed, Ian Scott Watson, who was Jim's mentor, asked me to carry on with the Border Reivers team and race.
And you did carry it on?
Yeah.
Did you get any wins then in your time racing?
Hmm?
How many wins do you think you got in your time racing?
About 130 or something, I think.
So if you won one a week, it'll be every week for 2 years, probably.
Well, in 1978, we won 28 races. In 1978, when we won the British Championship for the most wins for saloon cars.
Oh, so the BTCC nowadays, isn't it?
Well, no, saloon car. It wasn't the British Touring Car Championship.
Oh, yeah.
It was just club racing, you know.
Club racing, oh yes. So how old are you now, actually? Just don't...
78.
78, oh, perfect. So... You did meet Clark when you were younger, weren't you? Your cousin, yes.
I lived in Jim's house when he was racing because there's a lot of trophies here, and his mum and dad were concerned about the house being empty. So for the last 2 years of Jim's life, I stayed in Jim's house.
Ah.
Which is only 5 miles from here.
I'm going there later today, actually.
David Runciman, yeah.
Yeah.
And I travelled back and forward to the farm here and stayed over there in the evenings.
So it's quite interesting. You're 78 and you're driving that car, isn't it now? Isn't it? The Mercedes? I think the average age for people racing those is about 20ish, isn't it? Around my age, probably.
Yeah, right.
But I don't race myself. I'm not.
a lot of Elite in the shed here as well.
I was told there's a car in the shed. If we can see that later, if you're comfortable with showing the garage. Yeah. But I don't know where to start actually. What was your earliest memory, do you think, of your cousin then?
Well, when he came here, sometimes because he was family, you know.
Yeah.
Jim's mother and my father were brother and sister. So so Jim's mother's a Niven, and like I am, and so. Sometimes he'd be going past in a vehicle and see him, because he used to land his plane at Winfield, which is just along the road here.
Oh yes, he had a plane. He went from he had a house in France and in the Bahamas, wasn't it, as well?
But Winfield was very fruitful when he was in, when he was living in England.
Yes.
Or in the UK anyway. Yeah.
So what periods did he not live in England when he lived in Paris or outside of Europe?
Well, I've got Jim Clark's road-going car they had in Paris in the shed as well.
I was at the museum yesterday and they thought that car was lost.
No, that's it, yeah.
Quite interesting then.
The Jim, 1966 or thereabouts is when he went to Bermuda. Mm-hmm. He lived with Jabby Cronbach in Paris. And that's when he had the car that I've got in the shed, the yellow Elan.
Oh yeah.
The left-hand drive car. Mm-hmm. And then he went to Paris, and of course he went to Hockenheim in '68.
Yeah. There's actually, I don't know if you ever seen this. There's an interview he did the day before he died.
Yes.
Have you ever seen it before?
Yeah.
It's I did a video on that actually. I translated some of the German bits. I don't even speak German myself, but I was quite astonished how calm, down to earth, and he was very nervous. I think I saw because he had his hands crossed and all that.
Yeah.
And he was covering the Martini sponsorship of Kurt Aaron's car actually on that program. You could just see, and his legs are covering the Martini wording. Was it always a big deal? Did you come to see his races all the time? Did you remember when he started around the 50s, and if you were born...
The first time I saw him on television was at Brands Hatch on Boxing Day in 1958 when they raced the Lotus Elite against Colin Chapman, and that's when Colin first noticed him. Yeah.
Did you ever meet Colin Chapman?
Oh yeah.
Oh, did he ever come down to the house and all that sort of stuff?
I mean, I know Clive Chapman, his son, better now, who runs Classic Team Lotus.
Yeah.
But Colin Chapman was, was at that time, in the 60s.
Yes. Did you ever, so you probably you were around for his whole racing career. He was only racing for 10 years, I was told.
Yeah, well, he was exactly 10 years older than me. Well, his birthday's in March, mine was February. And he was 36 and I was 1946. So there's 10 years difference. So therefore, I was 22 when he was killed. So I was at school most of the time, in his career before that,
Was there ever like a big fanfare, if he raced international? Would people surround, let's say, the radio or a television, even if it was broadcast even? Because I know maybe 1 or 2 races out of Germany were broadcast on television. Would there ever be some sort of fanfare nervousness if you're listening to, let's say, him racing for a win or a championship, or even the 500 win?
Yeah, we went to Edinburgh with his parents to watch the Indianapolis 500 when he won that in the early hours of the morning at the Odeon Cinema in Edinburgh, and we went with his parents to watch him race when he won that race.
Was it always very nervous? It was you had more nerves looking at him race at over 200 miles an hour compared to like the other drivers.
No, his mother didn't like watching him. In fact, never watched him race because she just rather just be away from it all, and she'd go and do something else and wouldn't watch him race.
Yeah.
As a rule for the Grand Prix anyway.
Yeah. Did you ever go to the Grand Prix in Brands Hatch or Silverstone when he was racing?
Brands Hatch, yeah.
Yes, he won it 5 times, didn't he, the British Grand Prix?
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
Yes. So it's going to be. So was there any? I think maybe when that car passes.
Yeah.
That's good. I think you need to sign something there. So I don't know. I don't know if you remember, but do you remember the day he died?
I do.
If you could just talk about detail. Now, if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, it's totally fine.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I was living in his house at that time, and that was on a Sunday afternoon. Obviously, just a news flash on the television, and that was on a Sunday. And of course, the funerals on the Wednesday, so there's an awful lot had to happen in that time, you know.
Was it tough to cope? You know, he was...
I was an usher at the funeral, you know, I was there to look after all the people who came, you know, to guide them to the seats in the church and that sort of thing. But it was all just a bit of a blur. It all happened quickly, you know. And
so
all the Formula One drivers came, you know, to Chinside.
Yeah. I think there's like one story about Clark is in Monza. I think it was like 1961. He was in big trouble in Italy because he was basically the Italians pointed the finger at him for Von Trips, yeah. But did he ever discuss about that? Because there are audio recordings of Clark discussing it, but I think the only way to describe him, he was cursing about it, like. But what did he ever discuss about any? Would he never talk about an accident?
No, it didn't. Because when I saw him just not long after that, and it was television was on, and there was a film going on in the background when we were chatting, and there was suddenly a whole lot of tires screeching and one another, and he suddenly got agitated with that. And I think he thought maybe there was something on the telly to do with that, but obviously it was a hard time for him because he was very upset about the whole thing, you know. And but to get to talk about it, all he wanted to do was talk about the farm and he was at home and what was going on, you know.
Do you think he would have retired after?
Who knows? I don't think.
Because he broke up. His girlfriend broke up with him because he didn't want to stop racing to get married.
That's right. He said as long as he was racing, he wouldn't get married. We still see Sally Swart as she is now, Eddie's wife.
Yes, she lives in New York now, I was told yesterday.
Yeah, she's in America, yeah.
Yes.
Springs, I guess.
It's actually more...
I've been over the state with her.
Oh, nice. She's a nice...
Yeah, and her husband Eddie Swart, who's a Dutch racing driver.
So they're within the family themselves, like, you know, you're close to them.
Yeah.
I don't know, really, like, it's very weird. Do you think, because he was many people on camera and in part when fans were meeting him, he was a very nervous person. But I was told in the museum yesterday that he was a very down-to-earth, not really that nervous in front of family and friends.
He's a very modest chap, you know, and basically shy, you know. And he did get less as he became better known. He had to do more public speaking, and he became more, you know, an expert at talking and things. But to begin with, he's a Borders farmer who was quite modest, enjoyed driving cars for driving cars' sake. You know, it wasn't about the publicity. You know, and it was each got Watts that got him to drive cars. And I don't think if he hadn't pushed him, he'd have kept going that far. And the late Jock McBain, who had the garage in Chinside, who ran Border Reivers team, you know, supplied the cars for Jim to race, and I think that sort of got him going. But he himself didn't look for publicity or anything at all.
Mm. Do you think he may have had like any sort of like anxiety or maybe some sort of like, you know, stuff with mental health as well would have been a thing with him, but because at the time he couldn't really discuss about it, you know, you were saying about...
No, I just think he just didn't want to, he just enjoyed racing, he would drive any car at any time, I mean, he was well known for chewing his fingernails and things, and that was just a habit he had, and that you could call that a nervous thing maybe if you want. But
do you think just people kind of like, you know, put it out of proportions maybe sometimes?
Sometimes, but the thing was when he was, you know, when he was around, he was just a normal person. But once you got him into a car, he was in the zone, and he just was concentrated and totally focused on driving cars, you know. And when they always said they knew which car Jim had driven because the gearbox was less worn, the tyres were less worn compared to other drivers in the same team, you know.
Did you ever sit in one of these cars? Because I feel like if you're in the paddock and your cousin's a Grand Prix driver, you would have a chance, you know, to sit in one of the cars, like, you know.
Yeah.
Did it ever happen?
Not at the Grand Prix, but when the cars have been since then, you know. Because we had, well, if you've been to the museum, you see.
I saw the
Lotus Katina and the Indianapolis car.
Yeah, they're very good cars actually.
And and also obviously the D-Type Jaguar, which was his first real racing car.
Do you think if he was, let's say he was in his 20s now, and started racing modern day, do you think he would have made it to Formula One? Because how tough it is nowadays.
It's just a different time, it's a different era, and it's difficult to. But I think because of he was just a natural driver, you know. I mean, nowadays the cars are so complicated.
They're closer to a Prius.
Technology that basically they're almost driven from the factory, aren't they? You know, the driver, I think it's probably 20%, the car's 80%. I mean, they'll get any of the drivers at the moment. Verstappen's got the Red Bull's got the best car.
It's a very tin needle.
Where Lewis is
a rubbish car.
In a rubbish car, but when he had the best car, he won the World Championship for years because he had the best car. Now, you saw last year when Lewis, or 2 years ago when Lewis had COVID, they put another driver in the car and they nearly won it, you know?
Yeah, George Russell, yes. I wasn't even watching Grand Prix racing at that point. I was only maybe more or less interested in rallying, like, because in Ireland rally is a bit more popular, you know.
There's a Jim Clark rally next weekend.
Yes, I was told about that. If I knew about it, I would have went.
Yeah, it's all in Duns next weekend.
Oh, yes.
How old are you?
I'm 19.
19,
yeah.
So you're a young person to be, you know, because Jim Clark obviously has been dead a long time now.
Yeah, it's
50 odd years.
He's been dead for 50 years, but people have been he was alive for about 32 years.
Yeah.
But people have been talking about him for over 50.
That's right, yeah.
So that's very weird.
I've been a trustee since 1969 of the museum, of the room and then the museum.
Do you think he would have been injured or killed in any other accident if he wasn't killed in Hockenheim? Because there are loads of other instances that he could have been injured severely.
Well, he's had very, very few accidents, you know.
Yes.
And I mean, as Graham Hill and others have said at the time, you know, it would never, it wouldn't be Jim's fault, the accident. You know, it had to be a puncture or something, you know. And the trouble is that they've never sort of confirmed exactly what the problem was, you know. I mean, I've been to Hockenheim, I've seen what the accident was, and talked to marshals who were there on the day, and that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, there wasn't a marshal when no one actually saw it happen. It was only Jim who saw it, like. And
there was a marshal who saw the car weaving about, you know, and saw them trying to correct the car.
Yeah, it's either my guess is either suspension or a tire slow puncture.
It looks like it.
But I remember in that interview he was saying Hockenheim was more safe because you're only going straight, there's no bends.
Well, that was in a long bend and that happened.
Well, yeah. It's
very. Obviously, it's no longer part of the circuit, you know.
Unfortunately, you know, it's more of a stadium now, isn't it?
Yeah.
You only have the end of one of the straights.
We were there. The organisers invited us over for the 50th anniversary, and they took us to the site to show us where it happened and all that sort of thing, you know. But no, to answer your question, Jim was as safe as anybody, you know, and an accident was going to happen through a mechanical failure rather than through Jim's driving ability, you know. Rule 5, that one, but that belongs to a rally driver, Gary Pearson, who's a works driver for Ford.
Oh yeah. And that's a motorbike there now.
That's a motorbike. That's 1981 535 Olympic 500 of these, the one in the back.
Christ.
And that was used for the German Touring Car Championship.
Oh, DTM, yeah.
In 1980.
I think this may be, is this a Lotus then, judging by the... Yeah. Yeah.
This is Jim Clark's car.
This is his car. Christ. Oh my, the yellow is still there as well. Pilot driver. Christ. I never knew I'd be this close to one of his cars now. I never knew I'd be this close to one of his cars now. Because I was told if I accidentally touch one of his old cars in the museum, they'll write off the insurance.
That's a Jim Clark. That's when he was in Bermuda, you see.
Oh, this was licensed in Bermuda. Oh, nice. Christ. Is it okay if I touch it, or is it okay if I just touch the car? Oh yeah, Christ. It's still in good shape, isn't it? Jump in. Oh, never.
Do you want to hold it for you?
Oh, no. It has a stand for a reason. this is the car itself now. Worn for a good while, hasn't it? Christ. There's the speed limit. These are the wipers, I think. And I always see this now with the Lotus cars. The gear knob's very significant, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And they always changed it to black then after Clark got killed. So, and the accelerator, it looks very similar to what was in this car.
Yeah.
It's a very pointy little thing.
Well, at least the heel too, you know.
So there's the brakes. So I never knew I'd be in a car that would be driven by a Grand Prix driver. And that would be bonnet block and a radio.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had car radios then. That's flame. That's something else, I don't know. God, I never knew I'd be in one of these today, no. So this was in Bermuda? Yeah.
No, this is in Paris.
Paris car?
Yeah. It's Paris, yeah. He gave it to Jabby Comeback, who was a journalist.
Oh, yes, yeah.
When he went through, but this is where he was living. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to be very careful here. I'm getting nervous already. That's the last thing I was expecting to do on this trip.
That's the story, yeah.
Oh, yes. Nice.
Yeah. The first time I drove to the gym club with the Lotus cars, March 1967. That's good.
It's amazing, actually, yeah. So, what would these actually cost nowadays, one of these cars?
Well, it cost £1,500 then, yeah.
That's about a good bit of money now. Oh yeah, £1,504 and 13 pence.
That included the tape recorder and the...
Oh, a tape recorder. Oh yeah, those are fancy back then, weren't they?
Yeah.
And yellow is a very nice colour for it now because you only see British Racing Green on most of the other cars. Well, British Racing Green's actually... That's a blue one now, isn't it? That's a Lotus.
That's a Lotus. These are Jim's different helmets and the border leaders badge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the badge I'd thought they'd keep to the front. That's the border leaders.
Is that one of his helmets in there?
That's the
Whose helmet's that?
It came with the car, I don't know. It wasn't.
But he wouldn't have driven this.
No, he didn't drive this car. This is a 1960 car.
Oh yes, yeah.
But Jim was racing at the top in Lotus Elites. This is the next checkered flag car.
Christ. So you have a nice collection here, and also the Ford.
Jim, as a farmer, you should be able to live off the land on this island.
Yes, I think I could bring some practical knowledge into...
Any special skills or hobbies that would be useful?
I think just what I've learned from my experience in farming.
You a good fisherman?
No, I've tried fishing once, but I'm afraid I never had the patience to do it. The only thing I ever caught was my thumb.
Would you make plans for getting away?
Oh, I think so, yes.
You could build some kind of craft, some seaworthy raft or something.
I think I'd try some method or other. I don't know how I'd do it yet, but I'm sure I'd have a go.
Do you know anything about navigation?
Not really, no.
Straight off.
Not without aids.
Now, I'm in the village of Turnside now. That was a great interview I had with Clark's cousin there. It was quite by accident because of this bread knife that I was told. So I have to go near the place now, half an hour walk. In actual fact, that walk turned out to be 50 minutes, but I went to the house, got a nice cup of tea, and was shown around. The Runciman family acquired the house in 1992 after Doug sold it. And the family were extremely nice because, well, I was covered in sweat after 50 minutes of walking and I was given a nice cup of tea. The farm is no longer a sheep farm, now a chicken farm. 30,000 chickens. My plan was originally to walk to the graveyard then, but David Runciman, the kind man, dropped me there and dropped me back. You can see here, this is a lovely monument dedicated to Jim Clark. Now, before I head back, there's just one thing I need to do. thank you for watching, and watching for the whole year. It's been very crazy with one of my first videos going completely viral, and I hope you're alright with waiting this long for the next video, but life is just crazy. I just want to thank everyone in the Jim Clark Museum, the Runciman family, Doug, and just you, the viewer, for giving me the motivation to post videos on my favorite sport. So here's to a great 2025, and hopefully more videos like this.